I'm very happy to be here tonight. I'm very proud also to have a chance to introduce you to the Quai Branly, but also I'm very impressed. It's a big responsibility for me to present a new museum in such a place, in such a masterpiece of architecture. You've gathered here two of the greatest architects in the world to produce one of the most impressive museums I've seen for years. So it's a big match. This is it. This is the Quai Branly Museum in Paris. And maybe first you're wondering what the museum is bearing, why the museum is bearing such a strange name, and what means Quai Branly. Well, the whole point is that it means nothing. Quai Branly is just the address of the museum. It's the name of the street where the museum was built. The quai is a street along a river, and we're very close, as you will see, from the River Seine. And it's mostly known in Paris as being the address of the Eiffel Tower. So our closest neighbor is the Eiffel Tower. It was a big discussion and a big topic to decide whether the name of the museum should be significant, should have a meaning, or should be only a blank symbol that we could afterward fill up with whatever we would be ready to do with. And this is the latest solution that I was in favor in. We have been nicknamed by the press le Musée des Arts Premiers, which could be translated maybe in the Museum of, First Art or First Nation Art or Tribal Art, which is part of our activities, but we thought that this name was very restrictive and also was a bit difficult to bear. And I was not so much in favor of a name too explicit like Musée des Arts d'Afrique, d'Asie, d'Amérique et d'Océanie, which would be a bit uncommercial and a bit also boring. So why not Quai Branly? It means nothing, so it means everything, and it leaves us the chance to do a maximum of different things within this new building. In the very first place were collections. This museum is new by the architecture and the building, but it's not new by the collections. The collection that we are housing in this museum are actually the equivalent in a bit smaller size of the Smithsonian collection. It's the French National Collection of Non-Western Art. It's the history of this collection goes very, very way back. The very first pieces in those collections were brought in Europe early 16th century, and they've been moved to many different places, starting with the palaces of the kings, to several other museums along the long history of the museums in France. Eventually, when we started the project, they were housed in two very different in style museums. The first one was the African and Oceanic Art Museum, which you see here, which is a place also known for its nice aquarium. And, of course, in a much larger facility, the Museum of Mankind, which was the very classical Museum of Anthropology that you can see in many major cities. So that was the point of the collections. When this gentleman was elected President of France, you may recognize the former President of France, Jacques Chirac, who was elected first time in 1995. You may know that we have a weird tradition of having presidents supervising personal projects of cultural interest. It may be strange, but it's like that. There are two things that might seem for you a little bit strange. The first thing is that you cannot be elected the president in France without having strong statements in cultural policy, not specifically on your cultural taste or distaste or cultural interest, but cultural policy as a public policy is a strong part of global policy in France. Therefore, over the last 30 years, each president have personally sponsored at least one cultural project, beginning, of course, with the Pompidou Center, sponsored by President Georges Pompidou, and then the Musée d'Orsay, who was overlooked by President Giscard d'Estaing, and then several projects were supervised and created by President Mitterrand. So Jacques Chirac had one project. And it was very political at the beginning. It was not a project of specifically cultural or neither artistic. It was very political. The idea was that it was a necessity, that's what he was feeling, that a city like Paris would have a decent and even more than decent, large and prestigious home for art not coming from Europe and from the Western world. So his first idea was to have something in your beloved Louvre. Le Louvre, as you might imagine, is not a museum like any other museums. It's the largest museum in the world. It's not the only museum in the world that is visited the way it is visited. But it's not visited like a regular museum. You don't visit the Louvre, you worship what you see in the Louvre. Most people who are going to the Louvre are not actual museum goers or people who are really going on museums on a regular basis. Most of them come to the Louvre as tourists. 80% of the visitors of the Louvre don't visit any other museum when they're in Paris. Most of them, again, are foreigners or tourists or people from outside of Paris, and they come to this place with the idea that they're going to reach there the peak of what humanity has ever created. Well, that's a little bit of a problem, because that peak means that the only interesting things that would have been created by man would have been created in Greece, Italy, maybe France and England, and basically that's it. So the idea of the president was to have a spectacular space in the Louvre, showing to this kind of visitors that this is a little bit too short as a view, and that humanity has a much broader and longer history. Also, he had in mind a striking story, and of course a very sad story that happened to the Louvre in the at the end of the 1980s, under a very different administration of the Louvre than the one who is presently acting and providing the wonderful exhibition that are or will be on view in this museum. At the end of the 70s and the early 80s, there was a major collector and art dealer who was at the same time a collector of African art and oceanic art, and also a major collector of medieval European art. His name was Charles Raton. Of course, everyone who is familiar with African art know that name. And Charles Raton was aging, and he was willing to give his collection to le Louvre. But he was willing to give the whole collection. And of course, the curators of the Louvre were really very eager to get the medieval part, but they were not at all interested in having African art, although the collection was an incredible collection. So what did they do? They refused the whole thing, and they said, well, we don't want that in our place. That's not the kind of thing that deserves to be in le Louvre. At that time, so I'll come back to that later, to the fact that let's go to this guy who you see here in a case in le Louvre. This guy, his name is Jacques Kershach. He was a dealer, a collector, and a very interesting character. Actually, one of his pieces is in the permanent collection of this museum, the piece that has been in his collection previously. And he had built a major collection. He was a very active dealer, and it turned out to be a friend of Jacques Chirac. And at the time of this very sad Raton story, he was rallying in favor, of course, of le Louvre accepting the whole collection. And it was very sad that this did not happen. When Chirac was mayor of Paris, they had put together an incredible Taino exhibition in Paris. Taino being the inhabitants of the West Indies at the time before the European came there for the first time. Of course, they were all killed by the European or the disease that the European brought with them at that time. And when this exhibition was shown in Paris, their civilization was very little known in Paris, and everyone was expecting this show to be, you know, the kind of specialist show that very few people go and really see. Just the contrary happened. It was the most popular show that we've seen in Paris for many years. It topped every Impressionist or Tutankhamun show or whatever, and it was a big hit. So through this experience, he became very closely acquainted with the President Chirac, and he was the guy who induced him in doing this big gesture, which was actually forcing the people of the Louvre to accept what, at that time, they were definitely not willing to accept. And then, when we started working on that, we found that whatever we could do in the Louvre was extremely important as a symbol, but would necessarily be done on a rather small scale, because the Louvre is not expandable. I mean, the house is big, but not that huge. So Chirac decided that he wanted this project to be in two parts. One part being this new hall, which is actually in the part of the Louvre which is around here, and then a new museum to be built. And as you see, what was, of course, extremely striking at the very early stage of the project was that the place the president chose for his museum was not somewhere in the suburb where, you know, you can expand the city and where you can have new projects being developed on a very comfortable piece of land, but far from the prestigious center of Paris. He decided that we should devote a prestigious parcel of land in the center of Paris to show cultures which were all the other cultures except ours. Jacques Kershach unfortunately passed away at quite early stage of the project and had no time to be seriously involved in the Branly project itself, but he did at time to realize this presentation in the Louvre, which is still there and will remain there. Here you have a view of the oceanic section, and here is a view of the African section in the Louvre. And of course, it's totally different from what we do in Quai Branly, but it reached a totally different kind of public. It's a strange situation where you show pieces to people who have paid tickets to see totally a different thing. And what we want them to have in mind when they leave the museum is just maybe another view of history, another perspective on global history of humanity. So those sculptures were selected by Kershach just to reverse all the old prejudice that you might have regarding African art or non-Western art. For example, one of the strongest prejudices that at least exists in Europe is that African art is great, but it's not all, because wood cannot be, conservated and it gets rotten in Africa. So everything should be recent. So that's why Kershach insisted on having some knock terracotta, as you see an example of them here, which were made at the same time at the Parthenon in Greece was made, which is, of course, a very striking point for the visitor we get in Le Louvre. Eventually, thanks God, there were a new group of people who took over the responsibility of running Le Louvre, and now all this story is a very friendly story. This is a poster that we have issued together with Le Louvre, Ensemble au Louvre, to express the kind of new kind of approach that you can have in this museum. Here are a few pictures of the opening of this American sculpture from Chupiquaro became our logo. We're using it everywhere, and this is a few pictures of the opening of this section in 2000. Then, of course, we turned our mind to the big thing, which was the big museum. This picture is taken from the top of the Eiffel Tower, so you can see we're very, very close from the Eiffel Tower, and that we were offered, and that's of course the advantage of being of having over our shoulder the President of France. We were given 2 hectares That'll be what, 5 acres, something like that, of the most incredible piece of land in the center of Paris. This man is not James Bond bad guy, is Jean Nouvel, who eventually won the competition. We had 15 architects entering the international competition. Number 2 was Peter Eisenman, and number 3 was Renzo Piano. So Jean Nouvel was eventually chosen, and this is what he came out with. You see, this is the model that he was presenting to the president just a few days after the competition, which took place late 1998, sorry. And you see how close we are from the Eiffel Tower. The idea he had was to build not only one building, but actually 4 different buildings, each of those having a very strong character or personality. Each of those buildings are very different. Another idea he had, which I think was very friendly for the environment, was the fact that the building would be quite low. As you can see, we are lower than the highest building surrounding the museum, those buildings being old buildings, being building dating from the 19th century. So it means it's rather low. It's, I think the top of the building is something like 30 meters. And the other idea he had was to put the biggest building on stilts, so the major part of the land was turned into a huge garden. The garden continues underneath the building, so about 2/3 of the total surface are devoted to garden, which is great, of course. So eventually the building opens in June 2006, and it was, of course, a very formal but I think friendly ceremony, with Kofi Annan giving a speech, and a lot of people being invited from all around the world. Those 2 gentlemen are coming from the island of Tana, which is a small island south of Vanuatu, and they're presenting the present with this traditional present as a reward from a gesture that a French president has done in favor of this island in 1903. So they have a long memory, and that was a very pleasant day. The success of the museum was immediate, and since we opened, we have had 2.2 million visitors. We had 1.7 million visitors in the single first year, and the average number of visitors in the day is about 5,000, which is a lot for a museum which looks large, but it's not so large. So why was it so successful? Well, I'll try to give you a few clues, at least what I think are a few clues a little bit later. So let's go back for a minute to the construction, which has been, of course, a tricky period, a very exciting period. Technically, what was done, the Consul General was telling earlier that it was originally an accountant, and that was a bit useful because the museum was established in 1998. We were a museum, but we had no collection, no curator, no building, but we were a museum, and we were 6 people. But we had one important thing: we had the money, and we had the power of decision. Legally, the museum was created with, again, no collection. We were to gather them later. But the money to build the museum. The museum eventually cost something around, a figure around $350 million US. Almost all of it paid by the government, half by the Ministry of Culture, half by the Ministry of Education. About $25 million were raised for separate projects you will see later. Now, another tricky part was that all this nice neighborhood, you have to remember that all this is located in the most expensive area you can find in Paris. So all the people living in all those buildings are highly important people, and they were not so happy of having anything built in front of their windows. So what did they do? Well, the kind of thing that you do in such a situation. You go to court, you sue, you try to stop you can try to interfere, and there are many legal ways to do that. They did, and they failed, which was nice. Another interesting experience was that at the very early stage of digging, we had, of course, archaeological excavation. And what did we find during those excavations? A canoe here, dating from 2,000 years backward. The canoe was in poor condition, but it was quite interesting, of course, to excavate it and to document it. So that took 6 months. It was a bit annoying for us, cost quite a bit of money, and but eventually we were all happy of this discovery. But it made for us 6 months of waiting until the precious canoe was fully excavated. Then, of course, the rest of the building would proceed. As you can see on this photo, technically the 4 buildings are totally different. You have a view here of one building, a view of another one here, and there are 2 others which are hidden on this side of the photo. But as you see, this is very traditional. Technically, it's just basic concrete and nothing very specific. But the main building is not really a building. It's more a bridge, a covered bridge. It's totally built in metal, on stilts, and technically it has nothing to do with a building or a high-rising building. It's more like a bridge. Another moving part, touching part of the building stage was that 2 big pieces of the collection had to be installed inside the museum at a very early stage because they were so big that they couldn't pass through the doors. So we had the satisfaction of seeing art quite early in the process, which is nice. Because as you know, architects are working very slowly, and building in modern days take much more time than used to do in the old days. In Paris, we're closely located. We're located very close to the Grand Palais, the Petit Palais, and the bridge Alexandre III. All of those 3 pieces were built in just 1 year, and it took 5 years to build our own facility. Now, while we were building the museum, we were also busy to work on the collection. That was a very exciting part of the project, and maybe not the most visible, but maybe the most difficult and important. So during the construction, we hired a huge technical facility outside of Paris, and we gathered a group of 80 persons, curator, restorator, conservators, photographers, who processed the whole collection. Processing the collection was first gathering it, taking it out of the boxes where they were stored in the old museum, sometimes for a very long period and in not so good condition, and to clean them, to kill all the bugs, to digitalize, photograph all the collection. And the collection of Branly are about 300,000 items for the pieces of the collection, that's one thing, but also 3 million photographs and about 1 million books, because we were gathering, again, the national collection on the topics we're dealing with. So that's not a small collection, it's a huge, huge collection. And to clean and to make a bit of a conservation work on one piece is one thing, but to do that on 300,000 pieces and 3 million photographs in 3 years is another thing. And we were very proud to do that quite successfully. We broke 1 vase in 3 years, which is not so bad. Not breaking it, but only 1. And we processed all the books, all the photographs, and everything is now available. On some of the pieces were even photographs in 3 dimensions. All the pieces are now available on our website. So if you go on the net to the Quai Branly website, you can access each piece of the collection for the objects and a huge part of the photographs. And we have the plan of finishing the whole photo collections in about 3 years. Also, in the same time, we tried to enlarge the collection. We were given a special grant of roughly $30 million for making acquisition, which was, of course, a huge amount of money. And we had the chance of acquiring a number of important pieces. Here are just a few examples. Those 4 pieces, for example, were coming from the André Breton collection. I'm showing specifically those pieces because what's nice when you buy pieces is that people are also giving away pieces. There were a lot of collectors who were, of course, proud and happy to see that a new facility was being built. And so not only were we acquiring pieces, but we had a huge amount of pieces which were given to us on a more regular basis than that was, of course, existing in the past. For example, this is one of the biggest acquisitions that we have done with the help of an insurance company. It's a Dogon piece, which I think was one of the most important African pieces still in private hand. We were very eager to get this piece, not only because it's a beautiful masterpiece, as you can see, but also because this piece dates back from the 12th century. And so we installed that at the entrance of the permanent gallery. And for me, it was kind of a response to one thing that one of the curators of the Louvre told me at the very early stage when I came to discuss with him the idea of having this department in the Louvre. He was, looking for some idea to convince me that was not a good thing to do. And he had an argument that he thought was very strong. He told me, well, in the Louvre, we only show things that are at least dating back to the mid-19th century, nothing younger. So that means no African art, of course, because there is nothing ever produced in African art which dates back before 1850. And that's full of diploma and highly educated curator from a major museum. So you see the kind of prejudice that people had, at least, maybe it's over now, 10 years ago? So we were very happy to have this piece. Now, let's go back to, or let's go a little bit more on the building itself. As you can see, one of the characteristics of this building is that the garden is closed by a huge wall of glass, which is very useful not only to isolate the museum from the noise, which is a nice thing, but also we use it as a huge medium to convey information on what's happening in the museum itself. It's very striking and it's very efficient. Then I told you that each of the buildings has its own personality. So that's the first building, the one who is overlooking the river, the Branly building. It's a small facility which houses the offices of the curators and the administration. And we call it the Shaggy building because it's fully covered with this kind of vertical garden. So it's very impressive. It looks like, like a very garden that would grow vertically over the river. And you have to imagine that this garden reverses inside the building itself. So in the group of offices which are at the tip of the building, you have the same thing inside. Like in my office, for example, there is a wall which is just like a rainforest wall, and I could have frogs or animals running in my office, which is nice. I love it. I love this building. And it's turned to be very popular. Of course, everyone is willing to be photographed at the foot of it. Now, the second building is totally different. And as you see, it's covered. This is the back of the Shaggy building, which has the same decoration than the other one. We call it the Samurai because it's like a small tower, fully covered with iron sunshades, and it looks like a little bit like a Roman army tower, or also like a Japanese samurai or a samurai crab or whatever you can turn your imagination to. It houses offices and also technical facilities for the library. And as you can guess, from all those buildings are not, most of the space are not open to the public. There is a reading room here and there is a reading room here, but the rest is offices, and both of those buildings being very narrow, we have the chance of having a lot of lights, direct lights coming in all our offices, which is nice. Now, of course, the main thing is the bridge, the building which houses most of the public facilities, and definitely the permanent gallery here. So again, only a bridge with those very strange boxes pumping out from the facade, which from the outside are, well, maybe a bit of rhythm on the facade, which would have been a bit boring without those colors. And from the inside, those boxes are providing kind of more intimate spaces in a gallery, which you will see is not a very intimate space. The garden, this is a photo taken at a quite early stage of the garden, goes, as you see, underneath the building. And the garden is totally different on this side, which is the northern side of the land. Those trees are oak trees and maple trees, and they should eventually become quite high. And eventually, in, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 years, should be hiding most of the facade from the view on the street or on the river. As you will see, the garden on the other side is totally different. Here you also see this round part of the building, which is kind of a support for the bridge, and which houses the largest temporary room we have. I'll go back to that point later. And at the other side, at the other end of the bridge, one of the two restaurants of the museum, the garden, the cafe in the garden, sorry, the garden cafe, which is nice and which is open only during the opening hours of the museum. Now, on the terrace, of course, this huge bridge provides a huge terrace on the top of it. There is some kind of a private river. The border of the terrace is a kind of ring of water all around it, which is our own little river. And at both ends, there are two different facilities. One here is the main reading room, and the other one is the other restaurant, Les Ombres. And now you see, Carol, what it's called, Les Ombres. It's, of course, because of the shadow of the structure and of the Eiffel Tower. This is a more fancy restaurant. It's terribly expensive at night, but it's decent at lunchtime. The funny thing is that when the company, of course, who was running the restaurant is a big company, because they had to pay a big amount of money to take over the operation. And they had to hire, of course, a group of new people to operate the restaurant. And all those people were new in the business, so the service was terrible the few days after the restaurant opened. So they took what I think is a clever decision. They decided that they would shut down half of the table until everyone was fully trained, and would only offer the other tables. So the result was, since the restaurant is about 100, I think it can sit 120 persons, that only maybe 50 or 60 seats were available. So whenever you were calling to get a reservation, the answer was, sorry, we're full. So you know how people are reacting in that case, especially in Paris. If it's full, that's exactly the place you want to get in. You want to have a table in this specific restaurant. And in about a week, it turned out to be the most fashionable, the most trendy place in Paris. And now there is a waiting list of about 3 weeks to get a table at night. But I rather suggest lunch. Night is nice, but terribly expensive, which is good for the budget of the museum, of course. But now the fourth building, which is overlooking the street behind the museum. Here you have a view of it on the facade, which overlook the garden. Nothing very specific. It's very quiet and very basic. But the other side is totally different. It's using a technique that Nouvelle has been using previously, I think, for an hotel in Spain, which was a technique which was inspired to him by the vision you have in some old streets of Paris at night, where the facade of the building are usually quite dark and sometimes quite dirty. But the ceiling, the old-style ceilings, very elaborately decorated and illuminated, are providing, in fact, the decor by themselves. So that's what he did on this facade. You see, just a very plain facade, nothing special. But inside, all the ceilings are painted. And with a very clever system of mirror reflecting those paintings, at night, the white facade turns into something extremely colorful. All that was Nouvel's idea. And the other part of his idea was that he wanted those paintings to be Australian aborigine. That was his idea, but of course he was not very familiar with Australian native arts. And so I went to Australia, and well, we tried to work on that. But that was a big amount of surfaces to be covered by painting. And no gallery and no specific artist was, willing to enter into something in such a short period of time. So I turned back to President Chirac, and he sent a letter to the Australian Prime Minister, Mr. Howard. And that was funny because all this took place, in 2002, 2003, at a time where the relation between France and Australia were a little bit difficult because of a war happening in Iraq, and the position of the French government and the Australian government were pretty different. And since this situation, even in this situation, the Prime Minister Howard responded extremely gallantly. He sent a letter to the French president telling, well, not only do I want to contribute to this project, but I want to support it. We will finance a part of it. And there is just one condition. We don't want those ceilings to be just painted for the beauty of the color. We want you to involve major artists, big name of the Austrian art scene. And that was done. And not only do we have beautiful ceilings in this office, in this building, but we have works and a collection of some of the most prestigious indigenous artists from Australia, the kind of artists that we couldn't dream to have small works, and they had covered full ceilings, and even more than the ceilings. Here you see, for example, some kind of engraving or tattooing of the windows on the facade overlooking la rue de l'Université. This is the entrance, the admission of the offices. This is, for example, the bookshop, which was decorated by John Maunjul, who was a major artist from Arnhem Land. So that was a wonderful and very touching experience. Maybe you have noticed on one of the earliest big photos that I've shown you that we had a ceremonial representation from Australia at the opening of the museum. That was, of course, corresponding to the opening of this building. Here, a view of the other side of the museum and the work of an important artist in the project, Gilles Clément, who designed the whole garden. We were eager that the garden wouldn't be exotic. We were terrified by the idea of the garden would be exotic and looking funny and conveying the kind of image that you can think. So we insisted on having something different from what you get usually in Paris garden, but not an exotic garden. And I think that Clément did a wonderful job with those huge trees on one side and those weeds and different kind of plants than you can see in Paris, but not an exotic garden. Another artist who was involved in the project is Yann Kersalé, an artist who is working with light and who provided this incredible lighting system for the museum at night, which turns the belly of the gallery into this kind of blue color at night, and it's quite striking, I think, at night time. Now, to exceed this bridge, this permanent gallery, from the main lobby, you have, like here, and like several other museums, to go up a ramp, which climbs softly, overlooking the huge round room that you've seen earlier, which is the biggest room for temporary exhibition, and which takes you to the main the main gallery. So the main gallery is a bit different from what you've seen elsewhere. It's, you might love it or you might hate it. Some people don't like it. I think most of the visitors like it, although sometimes they feel a bit uncomfortable because it's only one huge room. We can say that the museum is always fully open because we only have one room. There is not one single door or series of rooms. It's just one huge landscape, 200 meters long, with no separation from one area to another one. The only indication that you're changing area is the color of the floor, which is, for example, red for Oceania. And the only separation is provided by this thing that Nouvelle calls the snake, which is kind of a medium-sized wall covered with leather, the kind of leather that you get underneath your shoes, exactly the same leather. And these snakes run around all the collection, and at several points, like here, there are screens which are embedded in the snakes and provide explanation. The way that this space is to be used is a bit puzzling maybe at first, because the idea is that every visitor is supposed to make up his own visit and choose the level of visit that he wants to do. So as you see, the cases are extremely large, and they're supposed to even disappear, vanish. You don't see them. You have the feeling that the objects are floating in the space. Of course, you have labels in the case providing information, basic information on each piece. On the side, as you can see here, for example, in reflection, on the side of each piece you get a little bit more of information, lengthiest information in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and French. And then, usually in a short distance, you can access those screens on which there are programs which are not just a short loop of information, but real databases. Usually each of those screens, and there are 75 of them in the total of the gallery, each of them is providing between 1 hour to 3 hours of different programs. And then, of course, you can also get an audio guide. So it means that you are the one who is choosing what kind of visit you want to do. You want just to make comparison, because you can run very easily from Africa to Oceania and make, some global impression and global, you can have your own private museum. You can look at the pieces on a purely artistic point of view, or you can, deepen more and more into information if that is the choice then that you do. So here are a few examples of the collections. Another thing I like in this display is that it doesn't want to pretend to be a representation of the world. It's not a model of the world cultures. I hate, personally, the expression of Museum of the World Cultures. It reminds me of this terrible Disneyland attraction, that they have suppressed, called It's a Small World, when you had 2 puppets for every country, and whenever a new country was entering the United Nations, they were adding a couple of puppets. And then from Angola to Zambia, you had every couples, and they were, waving the flag, and that was supposed to give you an idea of the diversity of the world and culture. I do think that in modern world, a museum cannot, through cases and through sample of items, pretend to provide information on the world and to be a kind of a map or a model of the world. A collection has to be used in a different way. So we insist on the history of the collection. We insist on the relativity of those collections. For example, our Asia is about 2/3 of our Oceania. Our America is much smaller than Africa, because our collections are much larger in Africa and Oceania than they are in Asia and in America, for example. And it's not because we're showing a few dresses, for example, from Chinese minority, that we pretend that you've seen China, or you've even seen Chinese minorities when you've seen those collections. Anyway, here are a few. This is one of the strong points of the collection. The Oceanic collection is definitely, I think, the strongest part of the collection, with some some also of the African collection, like the Cameroon collection is quite good. And then, and here another view of which is the smallest part of the collection, the American collection. The pre-Columbian collection is quite small. We have a good Aztec stone collection, but for the rest, the collection is quite tiny. We do have a wonderful and very important collection of northern native Indian painting on skins, because this comes back from the attempts of the French to colonize Northern America, and then a good number of incredible pieces were sent to the kings, and thanks God the kings were not so much interested in those pieces, so they were kept in storage for centuries, and they're in incredible condition. But for the rest, the collection is not the best in the world, nothing compared to what you can see in major American museums. Here is one example of what we can do with those boxes that you've seen from the outside. This is one of the smallest of those boxes. You see from the inside, it's a neat little case for Zaire mask. And on the other hand, this is one of the biggest that we have turned into a music room. This is a place where we have two of those music rooms where people are invited to experience several, different music from different continents in 3 dimensions. Then we have the mezzanines. One of those mezzanines, the smallest one, which you can see here, topping at the middle of the museum, is devoted to information that the objects cannot directly provide, as information on languages or architecture. And then we have 2 big mezzanines at each end of the gallery. I'll go back to that just a little bit. 2 huge mezzanines, which are very important for temporary exhibition. Yes, we were very eager to work on the accessibility of the museum, for example, for the blind persons and also for person using a wheelchair. This seems very basic and natural to you. It's not in Europe, where we're very retarded regarding whatever we should do for the disabled. So it was something that actually the President himself, President Chirac, insisted very strongly. So we had this huge snake, which was used, you remember, for housing the screens on the sides corresponding of the collection. But the snake in the middle is also providing some kind of a street all along. You see here at the entrance the big Dogon sculpture I told you about. And this street was designed at first by the architect to be some kind of quick, rapid circulation way. But it was also a great space to do something. So we decided that we were going to put together a specific exhibition for people who cannot see. Of course, in every museum you have a specific gallery for people who cannot see. But the idea of this exhibition, whose topic is mapping, representing the world, the real world and the world of the gods. We wanted this exhibition to be primarily designed for the blind and to be primarily tactile. So there are also some screens, and the people who can see and who are lazy to touch can also get a bit of information. But it's just the reverse of the tactile gallery, where there is some kind of a first-class service for people who can use their eyes, and some kind of a second-class thing for people who cannot see. It's just the reverse. If in this gallery is the people who are very able with their hands and have a tactile ability, which will be provided with the best service. So that was I think an interesting idea. At least I like it. Now this is a view of the main garden gallery for temporary exhibition, and other kind of facilities that of course all museums need. Room for teaching and research, and of course the library. Since we had this huge collection and photo, we were needing a large reading room, so we have this incredible reading room which can sit 300 students. It's only accessible to scholars and people who have official need of getting there. I think it's a place where it's a bit difficult to work because the view over Paris is so incredible that you might have some difficulty to concentrate on your work, but it's a nice place. And then we have another library which I like very much. We christened it after the name of Jacques Kershage. It's located at the entrance of the museum, just before you go up the ramp to the permanent gallery. And we call it Salon de Lecture. It's not exactly a library, because there are pieces of the collection which are changed on a regular basis, and all the books which are in this reading room are also changed on a regular basis, according to the temporary exhibitions, for example, but also to the time of the year, to specific events which are happening all around the world. Like, for example, we have a specific whole group of books now on Malaysia and what's happening in Myanmar, for example, at the moment. It's a nice place. Another interesting detail from the architecture which I like is, as you can guess, in an anthropological museum, the collections are extremely large. In every museum, the collection are too large to be permanently exhibited, but when you're dealing with ethnography, the proportion is even bigger. In our museum, the proportion is, I think, the average. It's about 1.5% of the collection, which is on permanent display. So we wanted the visitors to have an idea of what's a storage and what's the quantity of objects that the museum can have. And Nouvelle was asked to provide at least visibility on one of the storage. Actually, he provided other spots, other points where you can have a quick peek at the collection in storage. But he also came with the idea of this huge tube, which actually goes from the bottom of the museum. Here you have a view, for example, at the lower level. Here you had a view at the level of the entrance, and it goes up to the top of the building. And when you go around the ramp, well, you go around this tube, which is filled with the collection of musical instruments, and it's a nice detail. Here are some of the more basic classical storage room we have. We are lucky to have, we have 7,000 square meters of storage, so it means that all the collections are on site, and of course we have also specific storage for the photograph, for example, and for the book. We also have a theater, which was a very important part of the program. The program, whatever the topic of the museum was, indeed, world culture and every other culture than the mainstream Western culture. The program was directly inspired by the program of the Pompidou Center in Paris in two major points. The first point was that performing arts and visual arts should be as important. Both of them should be very important. So we wanted not the theater to be a small and accessory place in the museum, but a central place in the museum. And so the theater can sit up to 600 persons, so it's a huge theater, and it's connected to a smaller one in the garden. So we have two theaters. We also have a small cinema, and this is the kind of place where we can have shows and for example, we had in this place the mask that we were talking about earlier. Now, the other part that we borrowed from the Pompidou Center, which is extremely important in the way that this museum is working, is the fact that half of the surfaces are devoted to temporary exhibitions. We have 5,000 square meters for permanent exhibition, 5,000 square meters for temporary exhibition. Secondly, the other thing that we borrowed was the fact that those temporary exhibitions are not to be strongly and directly and obviously connected with the permanent exhibition. They can be very loosely connected. So that means that although we have a very tiny or almost no contemporary art collection, I'll go back to that later, we have a lot of contemporary exhibitions. So it means that the way the museum works is more the way, I don't know, a concert hall or an orchestra would work. An orchestra as a permanent conductor, but invites over a lot of guest conductors. And so in one season you have different view perspective on what can be the music and also the way music can be played and can be conveyed to the audience. So not only do we have a lot of temporary exhibitions, we opened last year in June and we have had more than 10 exhibitions since the opening, but the idea was that all those exhibitions had to be not only different by the topic, but totally different by the approach, by the way they were curated, and even by the, I don't know, the spirit they were made with. The first one, for example, was D'un regard l'autre, which means, I don't know, something like from one site to another site, from one perspective to another perspective, which was in fact a kind of historical review of the appreciation and sometimes despise of Westerners regarding the rest of the world culture. So it was kind of a visit through the history of collecting and looking upon non-Western art by travelers, soldiers, men of science, anthropologists, and of course eventually artists. Here, for example, it's a very interesting piece, which is a sculpture, not really a sculpture, but a ceremonial piece of art from Vanuatu, which once belonged to Picasso. Picasso seated it on a chair in his studio, and at one point he gave it as a present to Matisse, and Matisse didn't like it, so he never collected the present. So as a revenge, you see, we seated the pieces in front of a Matisse painting during the exhibition. Another topic, another exhibition. This is an exhibition that was co-produced with the St. Louis Art Museum, New Island. Of course, another region, part of New Guinea, but a totally different approach. The kind of great tribal art show, the kind of exhibition, for example, compared to the one you can see at the Metropolitan Museum presently. But to puzzle a little bit the public, exactly at the same time, in another part of the exhibition, we have shown your beloved Yinka Shonibare. The man will be coming here for a lecture early January. We produced the biggest piece that he had ever produced, which was called Garden of Love, and which was inspired by Fragonard. He decided he wanted to turn 3 Fragonard paintings. As you see, he is always making joke about Western snobism. Like, for example, he's following his name he insisted that on the poster, his name would be followed by the initial of the dignity he was granted in Great Britain, member of the British Empire. And he's a great, great artist and a wonderful man. You will love hearing him. Please come to listen to him. He's a wonderful person. So he installed 3 groups of sculptures which were directly inspired from those Fragonard paintings in a big maze. All the stuff took about 600 square meters to install the whole thing. You see a funny use of the Chanel logo, and well, that was interesting to have this huge piece of art, this huge installation, confronted with New Island, which was an incredibly interesting exhibition, but the very kind of thing that you were expecting in Quai Branly. You maybe were not expecting Yinka Shonibare. And of course, as usual, the sculpture had beheaded, and he told me that it was, of course, specifically accurate in France because of the French Revolution, that the aristocrat had been beheaded. Another example of the kind of match we're looking for, this is an exhibition that is presently on display, also contemporary. The idea, which was not totally successful from my point of view, but quite interesting, was to invite artists who are not usually producing for museum to do something about African diaspora. So almost those artists here, Jean-Pierre Bécolo, for example, is a movie maker. Caroline Cartier is a film operator. Claire Denis is a movie director. John Galliano, you know John Galliano, I suppose. Agnès Godard, she's working for, she's a creator on radio. Jeff Mills, who is a musician. Mathilde Monnier, she's a choreographer, to produce something about African diaspora. So the first trick was how artists could be at ease in a museum for permanent, I mean for installation, when they're not usually using that media. And the other point was showing successful Africa. I mean, we're all a bit tired of Africa and African contemporary art only dealing with political issues, with the terrible events and a very pessimistic view over Africa. And this exhibition conveys a very trendy, I would say a very jazzy, or I don't know how to express that, even a bit snobbish view of Africa, showing that Africa is also a deep source of inspiration for trends, culture, and happiness in the world. And this exhibition is presented exactly at the same time as this other exhibition, a very classical, high-class show on Benin royal art. And I think the combination of those two exhibitions is also very helpful against the prejudice I was talking earlier. This Benin show shows Africa as you would show, I don't know, the first emperor of China. I guess you have this show around. This is Africa with high regalia, with hierarchy, with history, with kings, royalties, with everything that people think that Africa was deprived of. I mean, people always refer to Africa as a space with no time, no history, where men are going hunting while women are going to gather food or water. And I think it's very interesting to see that this vision is, of course, totally fake and totally partial, and that Africa had history, had time, had events, and in this case, succession of kings and succession of great masters whom you can identify in some case, and also date, not date, but give a date to give an historical timing. Another totally different kind of exhibition. What is the body? A very sophisticated, almost incomprehensible exhibition for the common guy. This is another attempt. Is an exhibition able to convey highly sophisticated ideas? This exhibition was put together by an anthropologist called Stephane Martin, who is interested in genders and how civilization are differentiating genders and defining what's a man, what's a woman, what's adulthood. Very complicated things that usually are taken care of in a book, and we decided to do that in one exhibition, and that was difficult to, I don't know if the exhibition was fully successful. The catalog was impressive. Was the exhibition up to the catalog? I'm not that sure. Another kind of exhibition, this one actually will go to Vietnam next month. It's a kind of a review of the work of French anthropologist Georges Condaminas, who have been working in Vietnam, and it's a kind of survey of one focus on the work of one specific anthropologist. Again, totally differently designed. And at the same time, we were showing Chihuahua, which is the pure example of tribal art show. This is the kind of show for tribal art collector. Masterpieces of African art shown on a purely aesthetical point of view. and of course totally opposite to the very, very anthropological and scientist Condé Nast show where there were no masterpieces but small pieces. Another thing we did in the contemporary department, this is Romuald in his full regalia, a wonderful artist from Benin who has produced this wonderful piece, which is now in the collection of the British Museum, that he called The Mouth of the King, and which, of course, is a direct reference to slave ships, and which is a very touching piece that I think we did not very well displayed. I was not very happy with the way the piece was exhibited, but I was very proud that the piece was in the museum. Totally other approach. Désiré Charnay was one of the earliest artists to go to Mexico, and he was at the same time someone who documented the Maya temples of Yucatan, and at the same time a master, a real genius of photography. And we wanted to show at a very early stage that photo can be shown as an art in an anthropological museum, and not only as an instrument to convey information to the viewers, but purely as an art. And so the photos were shown, of course, on vintage prints, some on negatives, and even the negative was used for the cover of the catalog. And they were displayed like precious icon, not only for what they were telling about the Maya, but to show a great photo artist. I told you about the nice collection of northern Native American Indian we have. So that was this show, First Nation Royal Collections, which also have been shown in Montreal. Another totally different show, Wounded Objects, about why objects, sometimes very modest and seemingly of very low value, are so much taken care of and repaired. That was, I think, a very poetic exhibition. I told you about What's a Body? This is one of our latest exhibition, The Aristocrat and His Cannibals. It's a show we try to tell the story of a very strange guy who was half French, half Hungarian, no connection with the new French president, and who had a very strange habits. He was, very good looking. That's him. That's him at a later stage. Good looking, big name, good title. So he used to marry rich women who were interested in becoming a countess. So he did that 3 times in his life, and 2 times with American ladies from the West Coast. And with their money, he was building ships. This is the first one, but he did that 2 other times. Eventually, usually, when they got tired of getting their money transformed into trips and ships, they divorced him, and he died very lonely and poor. But in the meantime, he gathered an incredible collection. So it's another type of exhibition, and this one we have designed it to amuse the kids. It's a very playful and sometimes a bit childish exhibition. A totally different approach of what you could do. You could, in the meantime, you will see some very interesting New Island and Solomon Island pieces, because he was also a good collector. Some very good photographs, because he was indeed an incredible reporter. But we decided to choose a totally different prospect. Then we have a lot of other events that are not directly funded by the government, but for which we try to gather private money. We are deeply interested in the connection that are existing in our contemporary pop cultures and in the non-Western cultures. It's an interesting fact that the global pop culture, the one shared in Europe, in America, is now deeply influenced by the traditional culture of non-Western countries. So, as you know, in France we have some interest for sport, with which you're not so familiar with, but which has some connection with football. We call it rugby, and the Rugby World Cup took place in Paris in September. And rugby, one of the biggest team in rugby is New Zealand. New Zealand team is composed of a lot of Maori, and they're doing a kind of a war dance at the early stage of each game, which they call the haka, kamate, kamate. I guess you have seen that. So we knew that rugby would be interesting people, and that rugby could be a connection between Polynesia for a kind of guy or a girl who don't go to museums so easily. So we decided, we offered the International Federation of Rugby to be the partners during the whole competition, and we put together an event that we call the Scrum of Culture, and that was fun. We turned the roof of the museum into a rugby field, and we housed the Rugby Cup during the competition. We organized haka classes. We aired all the match of the competition, and before each match we were providing lecture on the civilization of the ancient civilization of the countries represented in the competition. Since, of course, this fake rugby field was quite striking because of the neighborhood of the Eiffel Tower, all the team used it, and all the televisions used that to air their show. All the teams used them for their official photos. There, for example, this is the photo of the captain of the 20 teams who took part of the competition. Here is a gentleman, I guess you don't know him, but he's the captain of the American team. This is your captain. And that's a photo of the All Blacks. Now, this is the latest thing that we have organized. It's just opened a few weeks ago, and it's a very ambitious event that we have founded with $2 million, a little bit more than that, because 2 million euros that we have got from private funding, and we have decided that we would like to organize every 2 years a photo biennale, inviting photo artists from everywhere in the world, except Europe and, I would say, mainstream Northern America. But to show those artists, again, not as documenting ethnographic, fascinating things like the last Tuareg in the Sahara, but just as photo artists. The only condition was that they would not have been ever seriously, I would say, shown in Paris. So we have displayed cases like here on a bridge in front of the museum. It's a partnership with a number of institutions outside of Paris. Each of them is producing a new show for this biennale. We have asked an architect to design also boxes where we have been able to show photos outside of the museum, and we also have installed 2 temporary exhibitions inside the museum. And we wanted to be those exhibitions at the very edge of what people would be expecting us to do. So, for example, one of those shows is devoted to a New Zealand artist called Anne Noble. She's from New Zealand, but she has nothing ethnic, or she's not doing things which are directly related to what you would expect in an ethnographic museum, although you can find some connection at a deeper level. The series that we are showing is very abstract and also very strange, and for some person quite disturbing. It's a series of photos she is photographing in a closer look the mouth of her daughter. It turns into something very impressive and, of course, very different from what you would expect to see. And in the same gallery, we're showing part of our very good collection of daguerreotype showing non-Western subjects. And also, we have a series of photos of Walker Evans, great American photographer, who's taking photo of some of the pieces we have in the collection. And here are a few posters issued last year of different activities that we can do. We have about, I think, 45 different concerts every year, and a lot of lectures. We also organize what we call the Université Populaire, which is a series of classes and lectures, classes on the history of colonization and decolonization, meeting, performances, and guest talk, how do you say that? People are going to make a lecture. And that's it, I think. As you see, we also provide activities for the kids. And we do offer research grants to a number of students, because at the same time that we're a museum, we're also a small, but I hope, in the future, quite active research center. And we do publish books, and even a lot of books. Here, this is what we have published in 1 year, you see, so it's quite a number of publication. And we also have a magazine, which actually, this is another photo of Anne Noble and her children's mouth. It's the catalog of work that we have been recently publishing. And finally, sorry, because I've been very, very long, and I guess a bit boring. This is the website which you can access dialing this, and where you can find information, programs, and of course all the items of the collection. That's it. Sorry for such a lengthy presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, I'd be very happy to take questions if you're not too hungry or bored. And again, you can find a lot of answers on the website. If you have a question, speak into the mic.
Just a frivolous question. So what's going to be the grand crochet and Nicolas Sarkozy?
You should have asked him last week. He was here. I don't know, but seriously, he already did something important. There is something really lacking in Paris, which is a huge, music hall. We don't have a music theater, decent. We have a lot of small things, but we don't have a good facility for orchestra. And there was a project which was half launched before he was elected, and they were quite expensive, and people were wondering if he would or not confirm back the project, which, by the way, will be another work of Jean Nouvel. And although there were a lot of controversy, and a lot of people in his own party was against this project because it's quite expensive, he decided to back it up, and the project will be built. So this is one show of his interest in culture. And yeah, I'm sure he will pick one. I don't know which one, but he will pick one. Yes?
I'm really curious with the logo for your museum. Why did you choose Native American arts?
The first reason was extremely practical, basic. When we started legally, we only had in our collection and in our property very few objects that were specifically bought by Kershage, through Kershage, for the part in the Louvre. All the other collection that we were going to gather was still legally under the supervision of other institutions, so we didn't have the legal right to use them. The other thing is that you have to remember that all this took place in 1998, and it was very important for me that we would establish ourselves as a museum and not as a bureau designed for building something. So I wanted my letter paper to prove that I was a museum director and not only, someone in an office dealing with blueprints and things like that. So I steadily refused any kind of initials or shortening of the name, and I wanted a big realistic photo of one piece to be our logo and to install us specifically, of course not to the public, because the public was not interested at that point, but to the administration and our colleagues as a cultural institution, even if we didn't have any visibility. And the other thing was that I thought that this sculpture was friendly, was funny. I love the fact that she had these tattoos, that she looked a little bit, fatty, and I thought she was cute, and that she could give a friendly idea of what we were going to do. And then it was important for me When we opened the museum, I was very proud to tell to everyone the museum has been established 10 years ago. We're not brand new. We are already 10 years old. So it was important that we stick to the same image, the same kind of typography, the same type of logo since the very beginning. Too many cultural projects in France have been, very shaky and have been changing bosses, changing lines, changing ideas in the course of the construction. This one has not. It's been very steadily done and in a very peaceful and interesting way. And this is something the team was proud of. So it was very important not to change anything. So for the moment, we're sticking with this logo, although, yeah, it might be strange, and even stranger is the fact that it's not in the museum, because it's in the part we have in the Louvre. So many people come and say, well, you have this sculpture on your catalog, for example, and where is the piece? It's not visible. You have to go to the Louvre, which is not so bad. It's another way to send them to the Louvre also. No other question?
This might be an odd question, but I read that the living wall, your vertical garden, is dying, that it's having a hard time being maintained because of the structural engineering. I did. I read that. And that you were investigating maybe restructuring that. Is that?
I don't know where you read that, because I didn't read that. Anyway, I can reassure you there is no problem. It's a very basic technique. It's just hydroponic culture. It's fabric, and in the fabric there are tubes, and in the fabric you have to select, of course, the adequate plants which are happy to live without earth and can be happy on fabric watered through the wall that runs in this fabric, and that's it. There is nothing specific. It's very rustic. Whenever you have to replace a part, you chuck it. Nothing complicated, and it does very, very well. No, we don't have any problem with that, really.
Okay, I want to ask one more question.
And if we would, it wouldn't be complicated. It's not a very expensive technique. The only issue is to be able to climb, to cut and now climbing on walls are very easy. They have this kind of elevator which are very cheap to use and to rent.
Well, I think that's just one of the most striking views of the museum. But my main question was, now that you're not the new museum on the block, do you find that the public is still supporting it with as much vigor and as much passion as they did with the opening?
Yes, that was the big point. Truth is that in every big cities where you have a natural history museum or a museum keeping a natural history, this institution usually is very highly regarded, very respected, but plays absolutely no role in the actual cultural life of the city. I mean, you can, if you are a trendy New Yorker, you can spend your whole life in New York without ever going to the National History Museum. On the other hand, the National History Museum is highly respected by mom, school class, family, and it's a place that every New Yorker is very happy to have around, but it's not part of the cultural image of the institution. And the people who will go to opening at the Museum of Modern Art would never go to exhibitions or to activities at the National History Museum. So it's the same situation that we were confronted to in Paris. We have in Paris 220 different museums, but of course most of those museums are for specialists, are highly respected museums, but they don't make, the trend. The trend is made by about, 10 or 15 institutions, not all of them being museums. I mean, 15 institutions, including the orchestra, the opera house, the National Library, and then a group of museums. 30% from the last survey of our visitors are returning visitors. So, and the figure of the global number of visitors is not weakening. We had 10,000 visitors last Sunday, for example, which is not bad.
I have just a question for everyone who came. I know some people here, at least a few, have visited. Could you, for a raise of hands, show how many of you have visited Quai Branly? So, look at that. pretty good percentage.
Usually at that stage, I'm asked a question by Michael Kimmelman and about the New York Times review.
We won't talk about that.
Okay.
So, one more question, and I guess final question.
It's a really small question. When you first come inside the museum area, on the walkways, there are some small cells with objects.
Yes.
Is there any special meaning? This caught my attention,
Well,
and I was just curious.
the architect and us in our ways, we're always eager that people would feel the need and the comfort to come back. And we wanted this museum not to be the kind of, very revered place where you go once and then you've listened to the statement that the museum is supposed to issue and then you don't go back. So there are a lot of small details that are supposed to, be like a game and that will give you the idea of coming back. This was designed by the gardener, the guy who designed the garden. They're just some glass blocks which are embedded in the ground, and in those glass are some insects, some small objects, beads or things like that, and it's just like it's no meaning especially. It's just something that you can discover. You don't know how many of them there are. You're never sure that you've seen all of them, so maybe you can become some kind of a hunter and try to find them all. And it's friendly to the kids, and it's not pretentious. It has no meaning, and that's it. It's just a small, amusing and friendly trick.
So thank you everyone for coming here tonight, and thank you, Stephane Martin.
Thank you.